when a person gets to the point in their life where they begin to say, God, I'm addicted to this suffering, or I'm memorized this anger, and it's connected to something that happened 30 years ago, and this emotion is actually hurting me. I'm thinking and feeling in the same cycle, and I'm signaling the gene in the same way, and my body still thinks it's in that same experience 50 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 20 years ago. The important point is that right on the other side of that suffering is joy. Right on the other side of that pain is freedom. Right on the other side of that anger is compassion. Right on the other side of that fear is love. It's just energy, and it's up to us to begin to recognize the amount of capacity in terms of attention that the ego consumes and begin to retrain it. I mean, like just retraining an animal, retraining a horse. It can work for us or it can work against us. And for the most part, we've been raised by the same parents that have been raised by the same parents that have been raised by the same parents with the same genes and the same genes. We haven't evolved much in the last couple 100,000 years. We're still addressing the same emotional states, different clothes, maybe different culture, but actually the same conditions. And so that's the wheel of karma. Karma is the emotion that we can't overcome that's connected to some experience. When we break free of the emotion, then we're liberated, and that's when we begin to see a new landscape or a new horizon. What is a greater expression of myself that I can be? And as you begin to think about and actually answer that question, contemplate a new way of being, you would begin to make your brain fire in new sequences and new patterns and new combinations. And the fact that you're able to make your brain work differently means you're changing your mind. Mind is the brain in action. Mind is the brain at work. So you begin to reproduce a whole new level of mind. Now, the principle in neuroscience says that nerve cells that fire together wire together. The more you do it, the more familiar you become with it. But it's not enough to stop there. It just can't be an intellectual process. It's got to drop about 10 inches from your head to your heart. And the moment your body begins to emotionally embrace that new you, as the moment your body begins to get the emotional signal because you're so focused on what you're doing, the thought that you're thinking in your forebrain literally becomes the experience. The end product of an experience is called an emotion. And your body, as the unconscious mind, begins to believe it's in that future event now. In other words, your body can't tell the difference between the actual event emotionally and what you're experiencing because you're fabricating it from within. The moment that happens, your body is literally getting signaled neurologically, chemically, genetically. You're literally changing your physiology. And if you can allow it to move into the body and you can memorize that feeling until it becomes familiar, and you get up when your mind and body are working together, you are in a whole new state of being. Being is when mind and body are working together, when thoughts and feelings are aligned. Most people, they live in duality. They think positively, but they feel negatively. They want wealth, but they feel poor. They pray for a new life, but they feel guilty. That's mind and body in opposition. We have to recondition the body to a new mind. And when it can become so familiar that we've unlearned something about our old self, we've got to give that up and then relearn something new, break the habit of the old self and reinvent a new self. To be out on that limb is the only place where the uncommon actually happens. That's where the things get weird and wacky and wild. And it takes a little bit of letting go of what you think it should be and being willing to be out in that deep water for a little period of time, because energy will reconform to that new mind. Now, most people, if you think about this, they when they run back to the familiar, then it's over. But if you're actually engaged in the process, it would make sense to remind yourself every day who you no longer want to be, and remind yourself who you do want to be. That's meditation. That's demystifying it to the simplest fashion, to get beyond the analytical mind and begin to have a future intention that's no longer connected to the emotions of the past. And when you're able to do that, then the universe then begins to conspire in those new and unusual ways. And now your internal state is actually producing effects in the external state. And quantum model says The environment is an extension of your mind. You change your mind, your life changes. We can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, or we can learn and change in a state of growth and inspiration and examine our capacity. Now, most people won't choose the latter because it's so inconvenient to change. It's so inconvenient to take time for our precious selves, waking up a little extra early and greeting the morning and beginning to think about who we want to be that day and who we don't want to be that day. To give time to our precious self, to cultivate something greater. Why? Because if you and I do that, everybody benefits. The lady at the shop, the car mechanic, the mailman, your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, everybody benefits just by you showing up as a greater expression of yourself. And those knee-jerk reactions that typically happened within the old self connected to an ego that was connected to an addiction to remember who it was as a somebody, if it's laid down for a long enough period of time and the person who's expressing a greater ideal of themselves is no longer knee-jerking, and they've overcome themselves in their mourning, in their meditation, they can look at their enemies and love them and understand exactly where they are because they're no longer in the same emotional box with them. That's the liberation that allows people then to start, instead of living in a selfish mentality, to begin to understand human nature and have true compassion and true love. And when they make a decision, the decision is no longer just for themselves. When they make a decision, they consider the whole. And that kind of selfless contribution in considering the whole is my interest in a new humanity. It's my interest in a new future, because we can't go on at the pace we're going any longer. We should never wait for science to give us permission to do the uncommon, because if we do, we've just turned it into another religion. We should go out and do the uncommon, then have science come and study us and say, we need to upgrade our laws.